Hello everyone, thank you for joining us today. Today's webinar will be recorded and will take roughly 1 hour, and if time allows, a short question and answer period will follow at the end. A few housekeeping notes. To the right of the GoToWebinar control panel, you can raise your hand and ask questions. Please submit questions via the questions panel. Our presenter Darian will be happy to take all of your questions at the end of the webinar. Today's webinar is titled Got Multiple Entities in GP, and it will be presented by Darian Tesser. Darian comes to us with over 20 years experience in the SMB mid-tier ERP space, with 11 years experience in technical support, 4 years as Dynamics GP Microsoft Certified Trainer, and 5 years consultative sales experience for Dynamics GP. I'll turn it over to you now, Darian.
Thank you. Hello everyone. Welcome to the binary stream demonstration of multi-entity management, taking Dynamics GP to the next level, brought to you by Binary Stream. So there's a little intro about myself, as you already heard, so we'll keep moving on to the next slide. A little bit more about binary stream software. So, we have about 15 applications on the marketplace. We have over 1,000 end users. We have 250 partners worldwide. Multi-entity management has over half of our customer base now, and we recently made President's Club. The biggest things about multi-entity management are areas that people are looking for is obviously to run multiple entities all in a single database. So you have one set of master file records, such as your chart of accounts, vendors, customers, and so on. Other pieces that people are looking for, of course, are also security. So you'll see in our demonstration that we have two types of security. One is around about users access, and the other one is about master file security. Everything about multi-entity management is at an enterprise level, so you're going to find a lot of enhancement to your current corporate performance if you're not already in a multi-entity single database environment. You'll also find that if you have been exploring Tier 1 alternatives, and we're extending the life of Dynamics GP with our product, because Dynamics GP by default is a multi-entity, multi-database solution. So a lot of people who are looking to stay in Dynamics GP or people who are looking at Dynamics GP can take advantage of the multi-entity single database environment if they've been looking at higher Tier 1 or lower Tier 2 solutions. Some of the benefits of multi-entity management continued here is we do a lot of things around centralized processing. So anyone looking for centralized AP processing or centralized AR processing or centralized payroll processing, our multi-entity management solution can greatly assist you in that area. So for example, you can have the same vendors and customers in your environment, and we can have one check go to your vendor and for all your entities, and then it can be paid from a centralized bank account. Similarly, in receivables, you can have all your receipts go to the post office box, and you can actually then have a central office taking the receipts and apply them not only to itself but also their entities as well, and we can manage all of that for you. The nice thing about doing centralized processing in our solution takes me to my next step to talk about, which is around intercompany processing. So anytime you have a transaction that distributes to a destination entity or away from the originating entity, we're going to automatically do an intercompany due to and due from transaction for you. So that really assists you well, especially again with our centralized processing. So as soon as we do centralized payments and we reduce the trial balances of vendors or customers, and we do payments or apply payments on their behalf, we're going to do the intercompany processing then and there. It will all be part of the standard journal entries, and it is all down to a majority of the Microsoft Dynamics GP core modules for subledger processing. Nice things about moving to a single database environment is also you can eliminate a lot of syncing of master file records. One thing I hear a lot about our solution is around month-end reportings. Very easy to do, the consolidation. You can run reports from a single entity, a few entities, or all entities in your organization. Nice thing I like to talk about too is around upgrades. So imagine you have a few databases, 100 databases. When you upgrade with our solution going forward, you're only going to have to upgrade that one database, and your IT team is only going to have to maintain one database throughout time. So it is a much more streamlined environment for your IT team. Some other features we can have here is when we do allocations in multi-entity management, it's going to be consistent GL coding because you can also apply that allocation not only from the same entity but across multiple entities as well. And then when you do some of those allocations, you're going to see that we'll do the intercompany due to and due from processing. And the last point I want to bring up, but not the least, about moving to a single database environment is definitely about logging in and out of multiple databases. So if you are currently in a situation where you have multiple entities in multiple databases, you're going to find that, you know, for example, we've had end users with many databases, as you can see on the screen, 30 databases, and it took them approximately 2 minutes to log in and out to go from one company to another. And they had 8 accounting staff. So on average, they saved an hour a day going to our solution with multi-entity management on Dynamics GP. They saved an hour a day per person per day. So 1 man hour, 8 accounting staff. So that's 1 whole man day saved per day. Adds up very quickly and can make our solution from an ROI perspective look very advantageous. Another example of that time cost benefit is on this slide here. So we've actually got another end user who was in the same situation. They found it was about 30 minutes a day logging in and out that they saved. Their accounting staff on average were $20 an hour, and they had about 12 users. So you can work that out for the whole year, and it's about $24,000 per year they saved just from doing that alone, let alone all the other features that we'll be providing them as well. So those numbers are huge. They can almost pay for the solution itself depending on how large you're going. That's the beauty of multi-entity management. We're really providing a lot of huge benefit at the Dynamics GP level without you having to move to higher ERP systems where it could cost hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars, you know, in maintenance over time. Okay, we're going to move right to the demonstration now in Microsoft Dynamics GP. So this is GP 2010, and I'm logged into the Fabricam database, and I'm also logged in as the system administrator. So first thing I'm going to do is take you to our home page with all our setup windows, and I'm just going to go through a few setup windows so you get a good feel for what multi-entity management is doing, and then I'm going to take you through some transactions, inquiries, and reports. So the first screen I want to introduce you to is our main setup window for multi-entity management. The first thing you need to understand is that in your chart of accounts, you need to have a segment in your chart of accounts that represents your company or entity. And this is where you're going to insert that segment from your chart of accounts into our setup screen. So the Fabricam database has 3 segments. The first segment is the entity segment, the second segment is the natural account, and the third segment is the cost center. Again, it doesn't matter where your entity segment was. Mine could have been the third, in the middle, or as it is now first. As long as it's in there in your chart, we select it, we are good to go. We do some things around the cost center segment or department segment. It's more about when we're doing transactions. So I'm going to insert it here, but I'm going to talk more about it when we're actually doing some transactions. I'm going to take you to our Intercompany tab here, and you can see here that as long as you have the automatic intercompany distribution box marked, then we're going to automatically do a due to and due from anytime you do a distribution away from the originating entity. So if I'm entering a transaction for company 100 and I do some distributions company 200 or 300, our journals will automatically post intercompany due to and due froms within that transaction. Centralized payroll also here for intercompany. If you mark this, then if you do a payroll run in Dynamics GP, you're going to find that you can do all your batches for all your entities at once. And if you choose centralized payroll during the pay run, then you can actually have a centralized bank account, do all the payments for all of your entities, and of course we'll do due to and due froms for any payments to other entities other than the originating entity. Over here we're going to talk about our security tab. So this is one set of our security. I'm going to just move this over a little bit, and I'm going to bring up just a couple of windows about security here. So over here on the left, this would be the security that you want to apply, what users have what access to what companies. So if you notice, this is myself, I'm highlighting DT. Currently right now I have access to company 100. So again, these are my entities here. And in our solution, we're going to replicate the exact identifiers and descriptions of your entity in your chart of accounts. So this is actually the 000 or head office account. This is company 100. And then I have all my other entities represented by locations. So again, I'm logged in as Darian. Right now you can see if I logged, or pardon me, if I logged in as Darian, then I'd only see company 100. And therefore, I can only do transactions in company 100 and inquiries and reports. I can't do any of those things in any other entity. If you look at John here, John's like a regional manager. He has access to a couple of entities. And if you look at someone like a system administrator or a financial controller executive, more than likely they're going to have access similar to this, where they have access to all entities. The key thing to understand is that at the single database level in Microsoft Dynamics GP, we offer the security down at the entity level, which Dynamics GP does not do inherently. Also, we have user class options here, so if you want to categorize a selection for security, then you can set up a user against a class, and then we'll apply that security appropriately. Over here, back on my setup window, back to my security tab, these are what I call my master file security options. And the easiest way to talk about this is to look at the vendor security currently. If I had vendor security turned off without this being marked, and I did a payables transaction, and I did a lookup on vendors, I'm going to see all the vendors in the entire database. So if I had 1,000 vendors in my database and I do a lookup on that transaction, I'm going to see all 1,000 vendors. However, if I have this option on in my setup, then we can restrict how many vendors we see at the entity level. And we do that in a window here called Facility Relation. And you'll notice here that I'm going to go down to a granular level. So here's my head office, for example, and you can see primarily that the head office can only see the vendors that begin with A. So there's about 100 vendors in here, and you can see primarily that it's only going to pick up the vendors that begin with A. There'll be a few others as well, but that's the primary what you'll see. And it's an exaggerated example just so you understand. If you look at my entity 100, you'll notice that we can see most of the vendors that begin with B, but I have let it look at a couple of vendors that begin with A. So you can share the same, you can share multiple entities against the same master file record for your vendors. The same can be for customers, so you can share them or differentiate them. The same with items, and the same with sites or warehouse locations. With employees, with our multi-entity management solution, we don't have a one employee entity across, or pardon me, one employee ID across all entities. As soon as you lock in an employee ID to an entity, then you won't be able to use it again. So if your employee works in multiple entities, you will, and you want multiple W-2s, one for each entity that they work in, then you're going to have to create multiple employee IDs, just so you understand that. However, you can have employees working from, if they belong to one entity primarily, you want the one W-2 to come from that entity, and you want them, though, to occasionally work at other entities. We have that as part of our solution as well, which you can manage. The last thing I'm going to say about master file security is, again, you can, for some of the master file records, you can choose their class or category. So again, when a user is entering a vendor, they can choose this class or category instead of getting down to this granular level and selecting whether they have access to that entity or not. The next area I want to show you in our setup windows is our intercompany distribution account setup window. This is where you set up your intercompany do from configuration, and you don't have to set it up once unless you're going to add new entities later, and then you're ready to go. So it's a very intuitive design. I'm going to start with our originating entity here, 000, and then down here you would create or point all the due to accounts to point to the originating entity like so. And then all of your due from accounts, will all go to their respective destination entities to match. As you can see here, 300, 300, and so on. You look at our next entity here, entity 100. Again, all the due to accounts point to the originating entity here, and then all the due from accounts point to the respective destination entities to match. Now, you can control the natural account here, or the GL account, so you can have a setup like mine where it's 1240 on the due tos and 2240 on the due froms, or you can have 1240 across the board for due to and due froms, or you can have a very specific 1240 here and 2240, and then 1242 here, 2242, 1243, and so on. That's entirely up to you to manage. The key thing to understand about the intercompany solution is that if I run a trial balance on all of my intercompany accounts, the debits will always equal the credits, and therefore reconciliation on the intercompany accounts will be nil. So if you are doing a lot of reconciling around intercompany accounts, you'll find that once you start using our solution, you're going to totally get eliminated from that process. All right, the next area I want to take you to is around our centralized processing. By default in our solution, every entity is responsible for paying for all of its invoices through its own bank account or checkbook. However, in multi-entity management, you can have a parent entity set up, such as my example here, which is my head office, the 000 as the parent. It then can not only pay for its own invoices, but it can pay for invoices on behalf of these entities that are marked. So it's going to be one check run in this case. It's going to pick up all the invoices for all the entities for a particular vendor, and they're all going to get paid from the 000's bank account. So if we go ahead and do that, and there are invoices paid from other entities, then we're going to reduce the trial balances for each of those entities that we're paying invoices for, plus any payments that are done again for entities other than my 000 head office are then going to invoke an intercompany due to and due from transaction right within the same journal in the check run posting journal. It'll all be there together. Again, if someone voids that transaction, then the entire transaction will be voided, including all the intercompany accounts. We can also do this for centralized AR receipting or centralized receipt processing. So an entity can take in all the receipts for the entire organization, and as you see in my example, the parent entity can apply receipts against its own entity plus the entities that are marked here. And when that happens, and when it again reduces trial balances for every invoice that's paid for all entities, plus we're going to do the intercompany due to and due froms for any receipts that we applied on behalf of the other entities. Okay, last area I want to just take you to very quickly is the checkbook setup. So you notice here that you can apply a checkbook to one, any, or all entities. You're going to find that over 98% of our end users have a default checkbook assigned to each entity, so that's pretty much the standard. However, we do have a few end users that do have the same checkbook across all entities or a combination of both. So what I'm going to show you here is more the exception than the norm, but as you can see, my entity 000 has 4 checkbooks assigned to it, and you can see that the first bank is the default here. If you're using payroll, these will be the defaults for the payroll checkbooks here or bank accounts. Notice that for entity 100, it does use first bank again, so this is more of a exception than the norm, but I do have a payroll 100 account here that is unique against it. And if I took you to entity 300, you can see that it uses its own bank accounts here or checkbooks. So again, we're very flexible in this area. Maybe one thing I want to talk about before I move on to starting to show you some transactions, and you need to be aware of this, is that there are a couple of constraints in multi-entity management to date. And so you need to understand that if if you have multiple entities and you're going to put them all in a multi-entity management solution, all of them have to have the same functional or home currency. So in other words, You can still do multi-currency transactions in multi-entity management. However, all the reporting financially and all the reports you run in DynamicsGP will be from the functional currency. So if you want to have a Canadian company with its functional currency and a U.S. company with its functional currency, that will not work for multi-entity management. However, what you can do is if you had 10 U.S. companies with their functional currency and 10 Canadian companies with their functional currency, you could run 2 multi-entity management databases where all the Canadian companies are on one of them and the U.S. companies are on the other. And so instead of running 20 databases, you're down to 2, which is still going to be fairly efficient for you. The other thing I want to highlight too is that we have a module in multi-entity management that does allow you to, that scenario that I just mentioned, you can do intercompanies for payables transactions, receivables transactions, or pardon me, payables transactions, GL transactions, and bank transactions and bank transfers between databases if you need to. So you can do a multi-entity management transaction between it and another database if required, and vice versa. The other constraint I want to highlight is that all your entities have to have the same fiscal year-end dates and period-end dates. So the single database of GP drives all this, and you just need to make sure that you meet those constraints going forward. Okay, we're going to go right into the purchasing area now, and I'm going to do a payables transaction here. So if you're familiar with DynamicsGP, you'll notice that the look and feel of DynamicsGP is exactly the same or virtually the same. There's very little difference because we program in the same language as DynamicsGP, which is Dexterity. So I'm going to just quickly highlight the fields that we've added to this window. So the entity field we've added here, the cost center and their respective descriptions below them, and this allocation ID field here. So I'm going to come back to the allocation ID and cost center. I'm going to focus in here on the entity ID. So notice that right now, voucher 639 is going to be entered to company 100 or entity 100. If I want to make that different, or pardon me, notice how it defaulted that to entity 100, and that's because when you go back to the main window or the home window, you'll see up here that this is my default at the moment. So that's something else I want to highlight from a user level, is that you can set up users to default to an entity here. So I've been playing with this database for a little while, but you can see the system administrator, if I'd have logged in and out, will default to the 000 entity. So when I log in as a system administrator, this will say 000. So what that means is that if I go to do other transactions and open up their windows, it will default this entity. So a user could work in New York for an hour or so. They're going to do a bunch of transactions for New York, and then they could switch this to the head office like so, and then anytime they default opening a transaction from that point forward, it's going to default that entity for them. So makes life a lot easier for your data entry user, people who are looking at multiple entities. Now, I'm going to just show you also that if I hit the lookup window, once you're in this window, you don't have to go back to that main window. You can do a lookup here and notice that you can select any company that you have access to. So again, this is where our user security kicks in, that if I'd have logged in as Darian, you'd only see New York in this lookup, and that's how our user security works. I'm going to stick with the entity 100 for this example and continue on. I'm actually going to change the cost center now to 01, and I'll talk about why I did that in just a minute. And then I'm going to take you down to the vendor ID. So remember, we have our master file security turned on for vendors, and there are about 100 vendors in this database. But when I do a lookup, you'll notice that our restrictions are on, and I'm primarily seeing the vendors that begin with B, but I am seeing a few other vendors here. But notice it's only about 20 to 30 vendors. So that's how our master file restriction works. I'm going to carry on with the travel company here, put in an invoice number, put in a purchase amount, and we're going to ignore taxes for this transaction just to keep it easy for you. I'll move this window over here a little bit. Actually, I'll move it over here. And I'm going to hit our distributions button. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how we do things a little bit differently than standard Dynamics GP. So we do a process called account substitution. So what does that mean? What it means is that if I'm entering a transaction for this account here, normally that would default from the vendor's master file record or vendor's distribution accounts. But for multi-entity management, we're going to say, okay, whatever entity we're entering this for, and if we change the cost center, then we're going to substitute that in here and here on the initial distribution. The 6520 still defaults from the vendor. So the reason we do that is because when data entry users are entering a transaction, we're trying to speed up the process for them, and 99 times out of 100, they'll want it to go to that entity and cost center in the distribution. For accounts payable, we're only going to substitute the entity here because we're only going to have one payables AP control account per entity, just like standard Dynamics GP. Now I'm going to do this again. I'm going to delete this transaction just so you can see that substitution working again. So I'll pick the 000 entity this time. Okay, we'll pick travel company. Put in the purchase amount. Again, hit the distributions button. Okay, and notice, again, the substitution occurs on the entity and the cost center here and here, and for the entity on the payables transaction. Now, the reason I change this around is this distribution is coming from my head office now, or this invoice, pardon me, that we're entering, and I'm going to say, well, I want to expense this entirely to my company 300. So I'm going to change that in the distribution for the purchase account. And you can do this standard Dynamics GP. You can type in any accounts that you want, or you can do a lookup here for any accounts that you want to use. But I'm going to change this to company 300, and as soon as I tab through the line, hit our intercompanies button, or click OK, it's going to put in the intercompany due to and due from right in the screen. So that's kind of different to standard Dynamics GP and other third parties that do intercompany for Dynamics GP. So the Dynamics GP intercompany will only do it for the AP transaction, the GL transaction, and you have to post this payables voucher to see it only at the GL level. And of course, if you had to reverse that intercompany, then it would just be a manual process to correct it all. If you had to look at a third-party intercompany solution, you'll find that most of the time to look at intercompany accounts in the transaction, you have to run an edit list. But with multi-entity management, that is not the case. We use what you see is what you get approach. We're going to push down intercompany transactions down to all the subledger levels. And where possible, we're going to show you intercompany accounts right down to an unposted transaction just like this one. So I'm just going to click OK here, go back to our distributions, and now you'll see here are intercompany accounts below. So there's my expense to 300 here, debit, and there's my intercompany due from 300 credit. There's my accounts payable credit because they own the invoice, and there's my intercompany due to debit to 000 for 1,000. So all that comes in balance for you. You don't have to worry about it. You can also change this on the fly, so I can put 700 against 300 and then maybe put the rest against entity 200. Tab through the line, and now you'll see the intercompanies will recalculate and rebalance. And these lines here, notice I'll change the intercompany account and tab through, but you'll see it will reset. So these lines are read-only, they are user-proof. So that's how our intercompany works in this screen. The last area I want to show you in the voucher here is about our allocation ID. So you can still use the fixed allocation and variable allocation that is in standard Dynamics GP. They can point to any accounts, and if they go to other entities, we will invoke the due to and due froms when the journal is posted. If you use our allocations, though, they can be used directly in the payables and sales transaction entry windows, or receivables transaction entry window, pardon me, and soon you'll be able to do it in the purchase order window coming up soon, probably around March or April 2013. Now notice here we have I have telephone expenses. So this allocation ID has a couple of different ways you can allocate. So you can allocate against a default distribution account in the payables vendor card, or you can distribute against just use the same default expense and default for the entity and the cost center. But the flexible one, if I select it here and then we go look at it in detail, oh, pardon me, here it is here. So if I select this one here, this one lets you pick not only the natural account here, but you can pick what entities you want and what cost centers. So that whole combination will be one distribution line, and it will allocate by percentage here on the expense amount. If I choose amounts here, this can be defaulting by amounts. And notice that if I wanted to, I can hit this arrow once I've selected this allocation, because these allocations are stored and can be used against both payables and receivables entry, for any vendors or any customers. And notice that if I do enter it for this vendor or this transaction and I open it with the arrow, I can change this on the fly. So I could choose any combination of accounts here and the allocation. As long as the percentage equals 100%, then we'll be fine. But I'm going to leave that as is. And okay, and then what I'm going to do here is I'll then show you the distributions here. I'll see if I can move that over and maybe open this up as well. So there you can see what our allocation was. It was $1,000 that we're allocating. And you can see here that there it picks the one account and distributed the 50%, and then the other account was distributed here for the 50%. Okay, it goes to accounts payable for 1,000, and then down below here is all the intercompany due to and due from accounts automatically being done for you. So if you've got a lot of allocations against different entities all in the same voucher, our allocation screen should manage that for you very well. That's pretty much everything from the voucher screen. I'd like to now show you the continuation of the payables area by taking you to if you're going to run some checks. So this is a standard GP 2010 Select Payables Checks window. We don't change anything here from the standard things you do. The only thing we change is around the middle here. So you'll still do a check run. You'll probably do things like select your criteria. Let's pay invoices up to the 15th of the month. And then it will go through and select all those invoices accordingly. The only thing multi-entity does is it depends on what choice you make here. So if I choose decentralized here, and I highlight these 4 entities, for example, put my criterion here and then build the batch. Of course, I'll put a batch ID and hit build batch. What it's going to do is it's going to create 4 separate batches. Each of these batches is going to pick up its own invoices that are respective to its entity and pay them with that entity's bank account. So it's kind of like running 4 separate runs for 4 companies. This batch is going to pick up all the invoices for New York and pay it with New York's bank account. This one will pick up Miami's, and so on. If you choose the centralized option to run, then you're only going to have one batch here. The criteria can be the same as what we just saw earlier. And when I build batch, it's not only going to pick up the invoices for, and it's going to base this centralized selection based on my centralized AP setup window that I showed you a few minutes ago. So in my example, the head office is the parent, and there are a whole bunch of other entities that are the children. So this batch is going to pick up all the invoices on behalf of all those entities I've marked, and it will all get paid from the 000 or parent's bank account. Now I've already done these batches, so I'm going to take you to the Edit Check Batch window. And if we look at our, if we look up our decentralized batch here first, here's my travel company. This is Company 100. Okay, so this invoices should all belong to Company 100, which they do. You can see here on the right. Any invoices that I selected here, I'll just sort by what I've selected. Okay, are all being paid. All of Company 100's invoices are being paid by Company 100 and by Company 100's bank account. So that's the decentralized process. If you look at the centralized process, you'll see here that when I choose a travel company, you'll see here that now I pick up not only the invoices, the invoices of not only the centralized entity, but also the entities that I've selected to be paid as well, all those other entities. So as soon as we print and post this run, we're going to reduce the trial balances for all of these entities, plus we're going to do the intercompany due to and due froms for all the other entities that we paid invoices for on behalf of the 000 bank account. So all that's taken care of for you. It's all automatic. The other thing I want to highlight here is we do have some third-party integrations here for maker check processing. So if you decide to use another Dynamics GP ISV or third-party like binary stream, you'll find there's about 24 ISVs or third parties that do integrate with multi-entity management. And the one I'm talking about right now with the maker check processing allows you to have, it can also allow you to run batches one after the other too that you select. So it's a very advantageous process, and that's McCorma Maker. We also have many other popular ISVs such as Green Shades, also other solutions such that are large ISVs like Wensoft. We have e-procurement solutions such as Paramount and RecLogic with Workplace and RecLogic, pardon me. So, and also we have great integration products like Smart Connect and Scribe that can also, you can build integrations from Excel or from other windows to bring in information into multi-entity management. The next area I want to take you to here is our inquiry window. So this is where I think the real power of our solution really starts to kick in. Okay, I'm going to choose the panels transaction inquiry by vendor. I'm going to highlight a few entities here. Mark them. I'm just going to look at what's outstanding for in terms of transactions for the travel company. So right away you'll notice that whatever I've selected here are the transactions that are being highlighted in my screen down below. So there's, and if I hit the sort by entity and hit redisplay, it will now sort those transactions by those entities. So there's all the 000 transactions, there's my 100 ones, and so on. The other nice thing though about this is that you could have one vendor has many invoices against it from multiple entities, and the vendor might call you and talk about a particular invoice number, but you don't know which company it belongs to. So you can mark all the entities here, look up an invoice number, hit redisplay, and oh yeah, it belongs to company 100. And then of course you can use standard Dynamics GP, you can drill into that transaction, and you can look at the distributions, and oh notice this has intercompany transactions in it. So all that's right down to the drill down. So the full audit trail of your transactions, including intercompany, are viewable on this window. Again, if you void this invoice or reverse it, we're going to reverse the entire transaction, including all the intercompanies that you see here. And that will all be in this window if you void it too. Just like standard Dynamics GP. Same with reporting. If I do a trial balance here, okay, just for company 100, okay, this is the exact same window to generate reports out of Dynamics GP, but we add this piece in the middle, which is called our list view. And notice right now, I'm going to do a trial balance for company 100 right now only. So there could be hundreds of invoices against, a particular vendor here, which I'm going to show you in just a minute. So you'll see here there could be 100 invoices against a travel company, but notice that our solution will filter out only what you want to see for which entities you mark. So here's entity 100 transactions only for a travel company. There's the total for a travel company. And if we go to the bottom of the report, okay, this would be the AP trial balance for company 100, which you can compare to the AP control total in the GL for company 100. Also, you could run a consolidated report. So you could select all your entities to do the same report. And now you'll see an entire trial balance for your whole organization in the one report. So now you'll see a travel company, but now you're going to see all the different entities, invoices within a travel company here. See all these different entities here. And then at the bottom of this, you can see I do a lot of transactions on this vendor. You can see there's the total for a travel company for the entire organization. So this can really assist you from a purchasing power point of view for your organization on a vendor to say, hey, we spent over $250,000 this month on you and we want some better pricing. Also, the bottom of the report will give you the AP trial balance for your whole organization. So from here you get a good cash flow perspective of what's happening in your organization. Other areas to consider in payables here very quickly is if you're going to run 1099s in Dynamics GP. We do 1099s exactly like Dynamics GP, but when you go to generate the 1099 reports at the end of the year, we do things a little bit differently. So again, we have our list view in here, and notice that we record all the different tax IDs against all the different entities accordingly, and therefore I can mark all of these entities like so. We do have end users that have one entire corporate entity and then they use our solution for divisions. So they could still select all their divisions and they can choose to print that as one whole 1099, or these are actual all separate legal entities like you see here. Then we can choose to print individual ones one after the other. So again, really simplifies that process for you at year end. Last area I want to highlight here for you, or a couple areas here, is the Smart List window. So you'll see here that any transactions, now once you implement multi-entity management, any transactions that you enter, okay, will automatically have a column here to identify which entity they belong to here. And that means that if I do a filtering, I can now filter it down at the entity level. So I can just show you transactions that belong to company 100 only. And now it will redisplay just those transactions here. Also note that all our security kicks in here as well. So if I had logged in as Darian again, as you saw earlier, who only has access to company 100, these are the only transactions I'm going to see in Smart List. Same with the reports that I ran and all the inquiries I did as well. You'll only see the entities that you have access to. A couple of final notes here, just some additional transactions. If I'm doing a bank transaction, or a bank transfer, pardon me, okay, Dynamics GP doesn't do this at the default. So you'll find with our solution, we can do a transfer between one bank to another entity's bank. So I'm doing a transfer from company 00's bank account to company 100. I'll now post this. And when the journal comes up on the screen, in just a second here, you'll now notice okay, if I just scroll this down a bit, whoop, too far. Okay, there you'll see the cash coming out of 000's account and going into company 100's account, but we automatically do the due to and due from transactions for you. So whenever you reconcile your intercompanies between your entities for balancing back to zero for who owes who what, you just simply exchange checks or do electronic transfers, process these transactions to the bank transfer window in Dynamics GP, and then everyone's back in balance. Very easy to do. In Dynamics GP, that is a very difficult process. And if we're doing a general journal, okay, you'll notice here that okay, if I enter this for 000 and I do like an adjusting entry, let's say I wanted to drive some expense to entity 300 that I forgot to, that I accidentally put to 00 to my head office. As soon as I have a balancing entry and I have different entities involved, hit the tab and the intercompany due to and due from accounts automatically will appear. So again, all that's taken care of for you. And again, like I said before, there are wrapper products like Scribe and Smart Connect, or if you do any integrations with eConnect, we have all the nodes to bring in all this information to say, hey, which entity does this belong to? And also, do you want us to perform the intercompany as you bring it in? So If you're doing integrations, you don't have to do the intercompany transactions. We will do those for you. Those are just some, that's our comprehensive overview of multi-entity management. Last thing I want to say to you is that if you're doing things like you have one company and it does all the sales and you want to pull stock from other companies, if you do that in Dynamics GP at the default, you will know that is a very difficult process. With multi-entity management, what we do here is we control which sites belong to which entities here. So if I choose one that I've set up here, my 100 site, okay, you put in here which entity that belongs to, and then we can do things like inventory transfers between companies, and anytime we do anything with a site with the inventory belonging to it from a different company, then we're going to do a to and do from automatically. So if you transfer stock from company 1 to company 2, we'll have the intercompany do to and do froms as part of that transaction. If you do a centralized purchase order, the 000 company in my example does does a purchase order for a few entities, and then they get receipted. The inventory will go to those respective companies, and then we'll do the do to and do from. And then finally, another example is if we're doing sales orders and you want to invoice all from company 1, but you want to pull stock from companies 2, 3, and so on, the sales, cost of sales, accounts receivable all go to company 1. You'll take out stock from company 2 and it'll be debited accordingly in the journal entry, and then we'll do an intercompany do to and do from. And all that's real time, the inventory gets reduced to all those companies and so on. And then if you have fixed assets as well, our solution is really cool because you can do transfers of assets between companies as well, and all the reporting in GP as well as the recording of assets will be against all the respective entities. And so that concludes our demonstration of multi-entity management for today.